No, it would normally be less.
Less.
But
Yeah, probably not.
We'll go right to Matt.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll let Matt know.
Yeah.
Okay. Everybody enjoying this at home? See? This is what you miss. You should come to breakfast on Wednesdays at 7, too. All righty. There was... Oh, here we go. No. Here we go. The Lord be with you.
So with you.
Let us pray. Almighty God, whose blessed Son restored Mary Magdalene to health of body and mind, and called her to be a witness of his resurrection, mercifully grant that by thy grace we may be healed of all our infirmities and know thee in the power of his endless life, who with thee and the Holy Spirit liveth and reigneth one God, now and forever. Amen. I'm going to, before we begin tonight, I want to show you a video, if that would be all right. And also it gives people time to get here. Hi, Gail. How are you tonight? Everyone at home? There's Gail. He's here. Why are you arguing with me, machine? Come on, machine. There we go. I don't know what that is. Looks nice. And there you see the roof of the Royal Botanical Gardens in Sydney. Okay. There we go. This is an artist's recreation of Jerusalem in the 1st century AD. Well, actually, it could have been the 1st century BC, too, kind of thing. I just want you to see the perspective of the average person. Okay, we're about to land in Jerusalem, apparently. There we are. Here's the temple. Look at the size of it. Look at the people. And I want just to, I'm going to pause it here, even though I dig the music. Okay. When I, for example, on Sunday spoke of the courtyard, that's all of this. All right? That's all of this. That's the temple. This is Jerusalem where people lived and worked and, spent their lives. So that's the size and dominance of the temple. And if I have my, and I may not have my bearings right here, or the sun in the 3D model might be in the wrong place, but this would be the western wall. Okay, that's the one remnant section. You see this wall here, that's part of the rampart that protected the city, but obviously, and you can see this was probably the oldest part of the city, or maybe this was, and then they built a new one, but they put walls between them because that was the best defense. If you're being attacked from this side, everybody's here, they run into this wall, run in, and eventually wind up here. One hopes anyway. Actually, wound up in Babylon, but still. All right. Here's what it's like down the street. Yep, that's gold. Gold leaf all over the building, so it would catch the sun, sunrise and sunset. The street lighting system. Watchtower. That rabbit warren of streets. Alright, the portico. That's the entrance to get to the entrance to get to the entrance. Here would be the way to the Holy of Holies. Now we're going to dance. All right, here's the courtyard. That's where the marketplace was. Here's a view from the residence of the chief priests and scribes. Wait, no, wait, no, okay. We'll lock that. Alrighty. Anyway. Yes, thank you. Thank you. You're very noisy. Yes. So when I speak of the size of the structure and how dominant it was, you can see how that became the focus of their faith, and you can see why when the Romans would periodically get upset with some of their budding insurgency, they would say, if you mess with us, we're tearing that whole thing down, which eventually would happen around 69 AD. So when Jesus said, you've got too much invested in the building and not, the actual religion it represents, that's what he was talking about. Is that everybody knew sooner or later the Romans were going to just, Roman emperors could be actually rather interesting, sometimes balanced, or barking mad, depending upon who was in power. So you never quite knew. Just think about that whole period. I mean, think about, we're talking about people like Nero and my favorite, Caligula, my mother's favorite, my mother's favorite, along with Ivan the Terrible and Rasputin. So,
The big three.
Yeah. As a historian, my mother enjoyed extreme characters. So anyway, but then you would also have Claudius, and you would have Augustus. You would have rather balanced. Say for Augustus having himself declared a god, that was unusual. You'd have some balanced folks, but anyway, that was they knew sooner or later it would happen, and when it did, that's when Judaism disseminated really throughout the empire and became much more what we recognize as Judaism in the 21st century. Because, think about what got lost with the temple. Not necessarily a bad thing either. What disappears if the temple's not there? Who runs the temple? Well, okay, Pharisees, scribes, chief priests. If there's no temple, do you need them? No. And so suddenly their kind of lock on the religion disappeared, which is why this era, really, well, during the time of Jesus, during the time of John the Baptist, this era is generally referred to as the Jewish Reformation, because this is what happened. And it began with those odd groups, for example, that produced, as we learned last week, the Dead Sea Scrolls, and the end point was the destruction of the temple. When they learned that, you don't need a temple to be in covenant with God. The temple.
The rise of the synagogue.
Yeah, the individual synagogues. Rabbinical Judaism, that spread out. So, rabbis weren't as important in the first half of the first century as they became then in the post-Jewish Reformation period. All right. You recall from last week, we had our top 10. Again, an arguable list, but what the heck. Dead Sea Scrolls, who discovered it?
Boys
Professional archaeologists, boys throwing rocks, right. Hotel Don Stella, you recall, that's okay. This one, area. How about the Galilee boat?
Boys throwing rocks.
Boys throwing rocks. How about our favorite, the Caiaphas ossuary? That old beer jammer.
Does not drive.
A man who could not drive. That's right. Okay. The reason I marked the Baruch Bula, do you remember that from last week? A bula being the small clay seal for a scroll. This one bearing the symbol of the prophet Jeremiah, right? And it's called, because it was Baruch. He was the prophet Jeremiah's scribe. Exactly. All right, good. So they found this. How big is it? About the size of a quarter. And there's lots of them. These are easy to find. As I was saying to somebody, there was a time where you could buy a lot of them. That is, not a lot of them, but a lot, for about $50. And they'd have all sorts of, they could be from all sorts of different dates. They're found all over the place. It's like Roman coins in England. Yeah, big deal. They're all over the place. The reason I marked this one, you remember the, where is it? I have to put glasses on. Oh yeah, the Mount Ebal altar too. You recall that one? Way up north. The reigning theory is it was a, 4th century BC animal sacrifice altar. Well, the reason I mark these two is there's some contention about it. There has been some discussion that perhaps the Baruch Bula is a forgery. There has been some discussion that we can't possibly know what this is. It may just be a stone structure. And in fact, the reigning theory right now is that it wasn't an altar for animal sacrifice, but an astronomical platform. Because remember, these folks knew their stars. Yeah, I mean, they couldn't watch the Kardashians. Right? So, which is what I know you people at home are doing. Instead of being here. All right. As things go, it is acknowledged that nobody's quite sure what that structure that appears to be an altar is. That's the reasonable supposition. The Baruch Bula, though, I noticed, I just took a little deeper dig, the people who seem to object to it being what it appears to be, and matches the radiocarbon and laser dating of it, they tend to be people in whose interest it would be for the Old Testament, what we call the Old Testament prophets, to be mythological rather than real.
Who are they?
Well, not Jews or Christians, non-theists, members of other religions, those that require a certain, well, here, this is kind of a classic. This is where you have to get into, you have to tread carefully. You know about Masada, right? Speaking about the destruction of the temple. Okay. The first Zealot war. The Zealots were the extremists who took their guerrilla warfare to the Romans, and part of the result was, of course, the destruction of the temple. And they took refuge at the great rampart of Masada, where, according to legend, what happened?
They got besieged for
Yes.
3 years, and then at the end, they all killed themselves, except they left their food so they would know that they were not being starved out.
Yes, yes. Hi, Eric. Everybody at home say hi to Eric. Flash the camera over there. All right, very good.
Just for you.
You gotta be safe to see them.
Yeah.
All righty, so that's exact. And is there archaeological evidence of that?
Yeah.
No.
Well, Masada's there.
Yeah,
But the reason that,
but it's Herod's place first. There's plenty of evidence of that.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
there's evidence that they were there, besieged, too.
Yeah.
But there's no evidence of a mass suicide. There's,
Oh, really?
yeah, there's no remnants of bodies. There's no really, really high amounts of nitrogen in the soil, for example. You know, I mean, mass suicide, unless it's Jim Jones, is bloody, especially in the first century. Blood lingers. Blood alters the chemicals in the soil. You can always find a battlefield by what's in the earth, even if it's a 500-year-old battle. So, the thing is, is Masada a big tourist?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's enormous, right. Well, once the archaeologists, who, by the way, were funded by the Israeli government, it started to look like the mass suicide was a myth, their funding was pulled. So that's okay. We can come back to that later. All right. So there's a lot of that. I think, too, people don't always realize how secular modern Israeli society, contemporary Israeli society is. And there's a sizable number of people who are Israelis who don't believe and see any kind of ratification of scripture or Torah or prophets, patriarchs, anything like that to be suspect or just an outright forgery. And it's always tricky because then you've got tribalism. And this is the tribalism, especially when it's in archaeology that deals with a religion. Because you're either taking down, like what Kathleen Kenyon went through, right? She had to, if she was at Jericho, then the people who sponsored her, and thank God she was connected in government and had grown up literally at the British Museum, but the people who were sponsoring her really wanted her to prove that the walls came tumbling down in Jericho. And in fact, if they did, it didn't happen the way it's described in Scripture, and it happened way before the actual Battle of Jericho. And she had to say that because she was a scientist above everything else. This is what the evidence proves. Whether or not it ratifies belief is a whole other thing. But the nice thing about that is when something comes along, like the Dead Sea Scrolls, classic, right? There are people that say that those are forgeries too, but come on. Like the Baruch Bula, like some other things, something does come on that does shore up our understanding of the personalities and events in Scripture, great, okay, good. Then we trust it because it's been objectively, scientifically examined. And not just, it's also the biggest danger in science is, you know, you have a result before you've done the test. Sometimes I think it's a little tricky. All right, today, do you remember what an ossuary is?
Oh,
Good for you. There we are. Do you remember the process now? As we know with Jesus, right? Someone dies, their body, or Lazarus, except he messed up the whole system, their body is wrapped in strips of cloth that are perfumed, and for a time, they're put in a tomb where animals cannot get to them. Oh, I meant to bring, I've got a really nice diagram, I'll bring it next week, of how the tomb, well, for example, where Jesus was laid, was organized to keep out animals, predators, whatnot, and to enable that great stone to be rolled into place and rolled by just two people instead of a forklift, or whatever they used to build stone in the pyramids. So, they laid in the tomb, the women of the family come, perfume the wrappings for a period until there is no longer, lo, he stinketh. There's no longer a stench, and the body naturally decays. But see, that's not it. Somewhere along the line, somebody comes and collects the bones. And the bones are put into an ossuary. And you can fit a lot of bones in there. There can be bones of mom, dad, sibling, infant who didn't make it to first birthday, just all sorts of things. So it's just what they found in the Caiaphas ossuary. And we all recall who Caiaphas was. Yeah.
High priest.
There we go. How do we know it was his ossuary? It says so. Okay. There. So does that prove it beyond? No. It indicates that might be who's in there. What now, because of the weird way in which it was very publicly and dramatically discovered, you'll recall, folks, the guy who backed the dump truck into what was thought to be the boulder turned out to be a wall. In the wall were ossuaries, several of them actually, and one of which had the name of Caiaphas engraved on it. All right, you remember that? Well, that was done in broad daylight in front of a bunch of workers. There was no way that it was a surprise. But when somebody shows up with something they found somewhere or has been in the family for a long time, you get a little more suspect in those cases. So, and that's where you really, really have to be careful. So now I'm going to take it, this is an ossuary that I'm about to show you. Maybe. Oh, look.
I want one.
You want an ossuary?
No, I meant that trellis thing.
Yeah.
Oh.
But beautiful.
I can get you an ossuary. I mean, that's easy. All right. Ah, there we are. Is that not a great ossuary? It's well lit, too. Yeah. What's it made of, do you know? Limestone? It is limestone, yeah. And what did limestone used to be? It used to be cool. What happens with ancient limestone, though? The consistency of ancient limestone gets rather like chalk. So you have to handle these things with great care. All right. In 1975, an engineer in Israel, who also was an antiquities hobbyist, bought this at an antiquities market in Jerusalem. Now remember, you'll see, there's some people will be standing next to it. Here, give you a sense of scale, I think. Oh, no, that's, okay, there we go. That gives you an idea of what, yeah, they're smaller than you think. People have used them as planters. People have used them as toilet tanks. People have used them for all sorts of things. This fellow looks very serious here. All right. He may be trying to look like a digger. He's really a squid. All righty. So in 1975, this guy finds this ossuary. And you could, up until 10 or 15 years ago, you could buy an ossuary online. There's a lot of them discovered. But he found this, and he didn't really think much of it, and it was literally a planter on his parents' apartment or condominium patio in Jerusalem. And then I think the parents moved out, parents probably died, something like that, and he took another look at it, and he noticed that it had. Oh, by the way, this is what happens when you open up a ossuary. It really is a bone box. That's what you find. Nothing in there says, "Hi, I'm Caiaphas." "Hello, my name is Caiaphas." No, nothing like that. All right. Well, he starts to take a look at this thing, and lo and behold, he sees this. An inscription. It's carved in there. Who wants to read it? It says, "James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus."
Wow.
What? You know about James, right? Brother of Jesus. James the Just. All right. So, again. James, Bar Yosef, whatever Jesus. You can pick out Jesus. Because remember, Hebrew goes that way. He didn't notice this until 2002, because that's when he was cleaning out his parents' condo apartment, whatever it was. Well, he immediately calls the authorities, because that's the law in Israel, and says, "I've got this thing." Within 30 days, it was put on display at the Royal Ontario Museum. What kind of scientific checking could they do in 30 days? Not much. What's that, hon?
How did it get to Ontario?
He offered it.
Oh,
They came up with the bakshish.
okay.
I mean, technically it was his. It was his possession. So it had been purchased. He had a bill of sale, or at least his parents did. And also at the time, the Royal Ontario Museum had just undertaken an expansion and renovation, and their coffers were running a little thin, and they were looking around for something spectacular to put on display, to bring in new members, to bring in old members, to encourage stewardship. What am I telling you? You know what happened. This was it. They brought it in. This is known as, there it is on display, the Royal Ontario. Not the British Museum, not the Israeli National Museum, not the Ashmolean, not even Ruth Penn, not even the Royal Ontario, on display within a month of the realization that this bearer, but it had the description of, "Here lies James," it doesn't say "here lies," "James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus." Wow. And you can tell you're in Canada because they have to write it in French too. All right. Pretty exciting, huh? Federal Express got it to Toronto so quickly. They had a little difficulty handling the chalk-like structure of the limestone. Yeah, they busted it. But that's good news, because you can examine the interior of the stone, and you can age it. You can use scientific methods to age, to see what the true age of the stone is. You can see maybe what it's been through. Has it been underwater? Has it been in a fire? Has it, I don't know, been around a lot of nitrogen? Has something happened? Have the remnants of flesh that were on the bones deposited in it? Has that left anything in there that could possibly, maybe not now, but at some future date, be used for a DNA test? It's all very exciting. Yeah, it revealed something a little odd, though. It made everybody, like this woman who just showed up. No. It made everybody take a much, much closer look at it. And because in 2002, we are at the advent of the internet age, where you could go to the bottom of the ocean on your computer with Robert Ballard in real time, where you could view a camera set up at the top of Mount Everest, watching the climbers climb to it. It's a much different world. All of that stuff, I remember, transformed education. Just in time for me to get out of it. Anyway, I still always want to look for a chalkboard. That's terrible. Anyway, you can't use anything else. They took a look at it. They noticed something. All right, here it is. James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus. Start over here, please. All right. It's written in sound bites. Well, that makes sense, because when it would have been written in the 1st century AD, 90% of the people were illiterate. So when you wrote something, it was to be read, right? When you wrote something, it was to be read aloud. And that's how it was received by most people. The second part is written in a continuous stream, like you would write when you live in a time where 90% of the people are literate. Oh, the scribes of the first century, even when they're writing something in limestone, very cautious. Look at these lines. See? Look at those parallel lines. Look how beautifully, in an unmarked piece of stone, they kept their lettering. Right? Look at that. Wedges, those are the little areas, the series. This letter is lower than others, and that's correct. It's extended because that's what one does. It is the lowest letter indicating lineage. What's wrong with the other part? Wrong height. Wrong letters. What? Letters are curved. Oh dear. No. And the scribe lines, well, let's just say they don't correspond. Now just look at this. Using your forensic, this is like CSI Bethany. Using our forensic vision, does this handwriting and this handwriting match? No. Oh Lord, was it a court case? The whole shebang got turned over to this fellow. No, it's not this fellow. Anybody recognize him? No? Oh gosh. This is Judge Rinder. He's the Judge Judy of England. Okay. He is flamboyantly sarcastic. He's not even a judge. He is a barrister, however. He came in second in the English version of Dancing with the Stars. So went to these guys. That's much more proper court. You can watch Judge Rinder on YouTube. Believe me, just find the best of Judge Rinder. It'll be the best 5 minutes you spend. Unless you want to watch Ozzy Man. That's another story. You ask Jenny about that. Starting around 2007, 2008, enough legitimate archaeologists came forward and said, forensic linguists and people who were able to use a laser to measure the depth of the letters and discovered the newer letters were deeper than the older letters, indicating a different kind of tool was used, or certainly a different hand, a different musculature, whatever, different, right? It took a long time. It was about 5-6 years ago. The fellow who owned and delivered the ossuary was brought up on 44 charges of fraud. Yeah. I hadn't thought of that. It's a legal mind there. That's very good. No. He was found not guilty, but he was found guilty of presenting false information or something like that. It doesn't matter. The current judgment is the James ossuary is a first century ossuary that did hold the bones of somebody named James, whose father's name was Joseph. I'm sorry, folks. That doesn't really narrow it down. You might as well, here lies John Smith, son of James Smith. Okay, well, that doesn't really narrow it down. The Jesus bit was added later. That's the current judgment. Now, if you're a reader of Biblical Archaeological Review, who sponsored the display at the Royal Ontario, their entire fundraising business plan is based upon the James ossuary being real. So they have kept alive, no, the experts are wrong. We're the experts. We're the editors of Biblical Archaeological Review, so who would know better than it? It goes back and forth. But it's still around. And if you're interested at all in the law, maybe some of you are, I don't know, you could read up on it online. It made it on either 60 Minutes or CBS Reports or something. Did a really good and really fair review of it a few years back. But that's one of the dangers. So, that's why hypercare needs to be taken. It is a first century ossuary. It did hold the bones of somebody named James, whose father was named Joseph. Beyond that, I'd love it to be James, the brother of Jesus, but if it were, would, I don't know, Jerry Mahoney come along and have to carve in fake letters? Well, that's not even good. Look at that. Much better. Oh, here's one of the major, here's a fellow. Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, those are standard, that's very much more like the Caiaphas ossuary. You might recognize this guy who's got a show on the Discovery Channel.
Ned?
It's not Ned.
Ned's gone. Now, by this time, about 1936 or so, Ned had a motorcycle accident. He did turn up a lot. No, that was the other thing. Not only BAR was behind it, but also the Discovery Channel, because they wanted to put it on display. And there's a number of Discovery Channel documentaries about it. And of course, it is James, the brother of Jesus, as far as they're concerned. Anyway, yeah, this is more like what they look like, though. And you remember the Caiaphas one, and I don't have that with me. That had a more ornate outside. All right, where are we going? Is it the Middle East? No, we're going to England's green and pleasant land, specifically Suffolk. Why are we going to Suffolk? Who lived in Suffolk in the 1st century AD, and 2nd, and 3rd, and 4th?
Roman Britain.
And
Yeah.
5th, yeah. The Romanized Britons. This was Britannia. All right? Which means the Romans were as responsible with their refuse as we are. Thank God. They left stuff all over the place. There's all sorts. And because their stuff wasn't made out of plastic, well, a lot of it's decayed, but because a lot of it was made out of metal, they still turn up some things. If you want to have fun, and you get Acorn, you get Acorn streaming, or BritBox, you know about that one? Oh, all the shows that get kicked off of Acorn wind up on BritBox, like Inspector Morse. Yes, 3 murders a week in Oxford.
Amazing.
There's a loopy show called The Detectorists, which captures the sort of subculture of the metal detector people in England who have little clubs, and they go out and they have to go through the bureaucracy. They have to get permission to go through farm fields and things like that. They discover things all the time, and the British Museum actually has a reward system. So if they do find something, they turn it over to the British Museum, they will get a reward for it. Sometimes it's 50 pounds, sometimes it's 100 pounds. It's a really spectacular, well, let me tell you. Right, no you do.
Copies.
The field.
People make this.
Welcome, yes. Welcome to Bildenhall, England. In 1942, this is in Suffolk, in 1942, a farmer was plowing his field. You're going to get tired of this, by the way. Oh, and everything I discussed tonight was not discovered by any archaeologist whatsoever. All right? Nothing. I love it. No hundreds of millions of dollars spent, or whatever, not hundreds of millions, hundreds of thousands of dollars spent, maybe millions spent. None of that. Nope. No official archaeologist. Nope. Guy plowing his own field. He was having to be careful, though, because the year was 1942. And what was going on? Yeah, and Suffolk is close to the coast. So he would occasionally find bits and pieces of bombers and fighter planes and tail sections of bombs and all sorts of metal refuse around there. Some of them, at least one of the British fighters was still made out of wood. I think the Hawker Hurricane, but don't hold me to that. And so he would find bits of wood around too. But as he was plowing, he was being extra careful because he didn't want to hit a live bomb that would have been dropped by some German or even somebody on his own side. And who else was showing up around 1942? Oh God, the Yanks. Yeah, with their B-17s, and they're just plain Western wildness, a bunch of cowboys. So he's plowing in his field, and his plow goes, motorized plow now, not, forget horses, mules. His plow goes dink, and he stops immediately. Probably runs to the edge of the field and waits till it doesn't blow up. Goes back, takes a look at it, and finds he's hit this.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. I know. Now, if you're plowing in your field and you discover these, what do?
Dig more.
Yeah.
Sure.
Get tired.
Dig and dig and dig and dig and dig and dig. Dig and dig and dig and
Go to
dig.
South France.
You would think so, except what's the law in Britain? It's rather similar to the law in Israel.
Antiquities Act.
Yes, the British Antiquities Act, which is very serious. What are you supposed to do if you find something groovy?
Yeah.
They have a hotline. They actually have a hotline. I mean, in the rural areas, they're still finding stuff, all sorts of. If you find a tile from a mosaic, which I don't know, if you find a Lego, it doesn't matter. If you're not sure what it is, you give them a call, and they will send somebody out. They've got a whole bunch of great collection of consultants, mostly, semi-employed graduate students, but nevertheless, who will come out and tell you, that's a Lego, man, come on. Except they'll say it in English. Well, this guy found all this stuff, so what did he do? Of course, he dug it up, he took it home to the missus, they polished it up, and they put it on the cupboard. And they bring it out when they have people over for dinner.
Yeah.
Yep. Listen to my wife, who would immediately violate the Royal Antiquities Act. All right, so that's what. Well, this in particular, which nowadays is known as the Great Plate, also known as the plate of Bacchus, because on it is a bacchanal. Yeah, we've got your wine, we've got your maidens, we've got your lubricious behavior, we've got all sorts of things. The sun and or Zeus gazing happily upon the scene of concupiscent chaos. That's a good one. Yeah, that's great. Well, he took it. They would just take it out for friends, huh? Where'd you get that? And oh, well, I had it. We've had it around. No, I didn't have it around. Yeah. Oh, I think it was Father's. He got it in the Great War. One day somebody was over and he'd left out a couple of these. I don't know, it says spoons. I don't know whether it's these spoons or these more ladle-like soup spoons. A couple of them were left out. And a friend of his said, what are these? And he said, oh, I found them in the field. One thing led to another. I think his friend ratted him out. In 1946, now the war's ended, right? And things are sort of getting back to normal. The economy's disrupted. Socialists have come to power. Things are in chaos, all this other stuff. They came to old Mac the farmer and said, oh, we're the Sweeney. You're Nick. Sorry, yeah, like old British TV shows. He got into some trouble. He was put on trial. Everybody said, well, look, it was a war, it was a chaotic time, all this, that's fine, whatever. We will not charge him. He was acquitted, and the British Museum rewarded him handsomely, £1,000 in 1946 money. That's not bad. Here's some of the items he found, though. Yes, the plate of Bacchus. Spoons, which also, according to modern
You put
tests.
olives on the ends of them.
Yeah.
Okay, Mrs. Martini. Yes. No, they're actually toothpicks. Spoon-toothpick combination. DNA testing has revealed that. Yes. Yes.
Gum in there.
Did they find anything more?
No. Except, I bring this up because it wasn't believed at first, even when the guy finally said, all right, I found all this stuff in the field. They said, nah, that's impossible, because no one has ever found Roman stuff that's this good before. I mean, this is not poor Roman Britons, right? This is a well-born household. But this sets the stage for what's to come. The spoons, by the way, are often decorated with scenes from what we call Roman mythology. Right? You know, not just Bacchus, but some other things. All right, we're going to go.
Those are silver?
Oh, yeah. Modern metal detectors pick them up real nicely. All right, we go from a field in Suffolk where we found this to a field in Suffolk where a farmer, you ready for this? A farmer is plowing his field. He gets home at the end of the night and he realizes, I think he's retired, so he's just sort of doing it. Just keep his hand in. He realizes, he was wearing work pants. This was this was not in the 1940s. This was in the Halifax gift. This is much more recent. Yes. Hang on. 1992. There we go. So he had a hammer in the loop on his work pants, and he realized when he got home the hammer was missing. And he thought,
My favorite.
Mabel, I dropped my hammer in the field again. So, Mabel said, well, your son-in-law gave you that metal detector, for your birthday. Next day, he went out looking for his hammer. Did you ever hear what one of those sound like? No, it's just, and then all of a sudden, and that means you maybe found a kid's car at the beach. He's doing that, and his thing goes, it basically almost deafened him. And this is why I found a coin, and a second coin, and 40 more coins. In fact, he found 569 gold coins, 24 bronze coins, 4,272 silver coins. Wow. Well, what's the significance of that? Oh, wait.
Bang.
29 items of jewelry in gold, 98 silver spoons and ladles, a silver tigress, 4 silver bowls, a small dish, a silver beaker, a vase or juglet, 4 pepper pots, including one that's spectacular. I'll show it to you. Would you like to see it?
Yeah.
Other items. All of it was in an oak chest, about yay big. That's what he discovered, because all that metal was concentrated in that small area. It set off this thing. Now, what happened to the fellow in the 1940s? Oh, bad things, right? Because he got hauled through court. He had to go through that. You know, sometimes the process is the punishment. And they only paid him £1,000. I'll come back to why that's only £1,000. This guy immediately called the 800 number. Actually, I think it's a 9,000 number. But anyway, he immediately called it. They came out and did something that archaeologists really do anymore. Remember we talked about how they treat the site like a crime scene. You don't touch anything, you label it all. You know? They saw it was there. They tested the whole rest of the field. This was it. They knew the oak box would not survive being unearthed, because really the only thing holding it together at this point was the soil. So they dug a big old cube of soil out, lifted the whole cube of soil with the oak chest and all that stuff I told you about in one piece, and took it to the British Museum, to the laboratory of the British Museum, which was actually in those days in Cambridge, so, which is not in Suffolk. And they very carefully, now the oak chest, it was a goner. As soon as the earth was removed from it, it might as well have evaporated. But this is what they found. They recreated the oak chest in Lucite, so you could see how it was stored. That's what he found. Now, a lot of the coins, obviously, there's about 15,000 coins there. A lot of the coins were disseminated throughout the British Museum. You can find this is on display in the British Museum. You want to take a look at some of the individual items? At least one person here. You want to see some jewelry?
Yeah, I want to see the jewelry.
I figured. Yeah. Here's some spoons. Combo spoon toothpick again, right? Oh, by the way, this dates to the 4th century AD. Oh, so still Roman Britain. Nobody's asked me, why is this stuff in the ground?
It was originally probably.
They were hiding it.
From the Anglo-Saxons.
Yeah. The Roman
The barbarian
soldiers,
wars.
the Roman divisions withdrew from Britannia at the time this stuff was put in the ground. We'll come back and get it.
Yeah, right.
If we have, a TARDIS. Nice, huh? That's very nice. What is this? Sort of sunburst? What's in the middle of that? That's an interesting figure, isn't it? It's a rather interesting, fleur-de-lis looking thing, almost like a cross. How strange. Oh, yeah, actually, yes, that's something. I just like the picture, I thought that. Imagine finding that. These are pepper pots, including this handsome depiction of the Empress, who must have had a peppery personality. I'm guessing the salt shaker was the emperor, and the Empress was the pepper shaker, whatever, the pepper pots. This was not the household possessions of a poor family. This stuff is spectacular. Look at that, and look at the oh, I meant to look up what stones are in there. What's it look like?
The big one. I don't know.
An excellent guess. I will agree with you, yes, that's what they're. We know who this belonged to.
Nefertiti.
Wrong culture. No, this belonged to Juliana. Her name's on it.
Like that what it says?
Yeah, trust me.
Okay.
Looks like Jane the Virgin.
Right.
Well, she may have given, it was common for these,
A-N-E.
it was common for parents to give these to daughters when they turned of age, so
Voter.
it might be.
King the voter.
Oh,
Wow.
there's an interesting ladle, spoon thingy. At the British Museum it says, mythical aquatic creature pictured. Yeah, what is that?
They're about Leviathan.
The Leviathan.
That God made for.
That's the Leviathan.
Ah.
We're about to discover this family was Christian. These were Roman Christians in Britain in the 4th century. There it is, cross, emblazoned there. Right. Also, oh, this is a beaut. Not sure what this is, some sort of ladle, spoon thing. But here's what is being discovered as more and more Roman, British things are being discovered. It's a marvelous combination of, well, here's Leviathan, and that, I know it's hard to see, that's the Chi-Rho. You know, it looks like the PX, right? The first 2 letters of the word Christos, which means Christ or Messiah. Yeah, you'll see more and more, they'll have, images from the Old Testament, and then, the ultimate image or symbol from the New Testament. Why? It's not a more formalized cross, it's not a crucifix, because the crucifix itself had not fixed itself in Christian imagination yet as a symbol of the faith. For a lot of reasons. We need to get pretty far away from the cross, the crucifix, well, what was it originally? It's a tool for execution. So if you had a religion, would your symbol be the guillotine, the electric chair? No, we had to get far enough beyond the terror of crucifixion to really turn that into a more, I don't want to say innocuous, a symbol that isn't automatically associated with
Torture.
execution. Yeah, death by torture. It's sort of like what happened to the poor Hindus. And the Hopi, I think. One of the most ancient symbols in transcultural studies is the swastika. Yeah, but try using that now. As I think it was the Norwegian Olympic team discovered. They had sweaters adorned in Nordic runes, one of the runes being the swastika, and they were accused of being Nazis because young people these days aren't educated. All right. Well, they are. They're just not educated in anything that matters. Here's the thing that really made the difference. So, of all those coins, I mentioned all those coins. Christian emperor, do you think? Obviously, that's the emperor. And on the other side, the Chi-Rho, which at that time was the symbol of Christianity. All right. What's interesting about this, the markings that you see on there, the Romans, you know what they were like? The Romans minted coins throughout the empire. They didn't just have one mint. They were uniform, but like our own coins, they bear the stamp of where they were minted. So the beautiful thing was, out of those 15,000 coins, they were able to clean them, scan them, read them, handle them with care, and were able to put together the coins found in a farmer's field in Suffolk, were minted in Antioch, in Thessaloniki, that we think of as Thessalonica, in Rome, in Arion, this whole trade route that wound up in the Britons, in Suffolk. Using those coins, got the whole, the whole trading route, the whole process, the whole map was spelled out in those coins. And all those areas, Christian, by the time those coins were minted. And that's the evidence of it. Isn't that interesting? The fellow, two happy things for the fellow. One, he was given a reward of 1.75 million pounds.
Wow.
Yeah, roughly $3 million American in real money. So, right. I say that just to see you get upset. 1.75 million pounds he was given. See, that's what happens when you obey the Antiquities Act. Everybody learned from the other Suffolk farmer, don't dig it up and give it to Pam to clean up and put out for Sunday best. No, just do what you're supposed to do. Call the right people. So he was, and here was the next great thing was he found the hammer. The hammer is also on display at the British Museum.
You could afford a new one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to, I'm sorry, that was known as, or is known as, the Hoxne Hoard. Okay? It's gotten to the point where people will discover these little pockets of Roman treasure throughout England, and they are known as hoards. And if you go online and you look up through the heritage sites, the list of hoards. Be careful how you pronounce it. All right, in 1750, some fellows, I'll tell you, what were they doing? Yes.
Throw a rock.
Throwing rocks.
No, the English version, plowing a field. They came across some structure. This is in 1750 now. Remember from our very first session, these are the antiquarians. We don't have the science of archaeology yet. But they uncovered a foundation, and this is an artist's conception of what it was, and they're pretty sure that it's a Roman villa. It's now one of the major national heritage sites in the United Kingdom. It was restored, but some interesting things were discovered there. Here's the restoration, by the way. It costs £8 to go and walk through this, but look for something that was discovered in 1750 and has been protected for that, for a very, very long time, hundreds of years. They've really taken great care, and they've taken great care of digging things out too, and they're still discovering things. Just all sorts of interesting bits and pieces of Roman life, including, little things like this. Little mosaics, just fascinating bits and pieces. There's clearly parts missing, but at the same time, some field in England. It's remarkable to come across
Somebody's
these.
bored.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Here's what it looked like, too. I would simply point out, look at this room here. You see the Cairo? Yeah. You see that rather interesting table in the middle?
It looks like a little chapel.
It was a house church. That Roman villa was a Christian house church, which, before the construction of great, massive, expensive churches was how Christianity was known, and I'm willing to bet about 100 years is pretty much how Christianity will be known too. It'll be back to that house church, because come on. Yeah. But that's, and again, it's been cared for tremendously. That's great. Okay. Let's go here. This is not from, that's the Lullingstone Villa. And again, you can go see that. This is over in a nice town called Hinton St. Mary, where, actually it wasn't so much farmers plowing that last bit, it was workmen preparing ground to build a barn in 1750. This was discovered in, I want to say 1975, but I don't think that's right. It's 1963, there we go, 1963. In Dorset, some workmen were building a foundation to add on to a barn. Does that sound familiar? Right? Okay. Professional archaeologists? No. This is what they came across. Wow. Yeah. Beautifully intact. In fact, they came across a mosaic roughly the size of here to the far side of the dining hall. All one intact piece.
And this was just buried under the ground?
Yep. Remnant foundation of some kind. They found this. This was the medallion in the center of it. Yeah, we recognize this guy. And again, and the Cairo again, right? And we've got the interesting and more Romanized Jesus, because beards were not fashionable in Rome. So let's not have Jesus be bearded. Now, we're always reimagining Jesus according to whatever's comfortable in our cultural taste. But yeah, undeniably Jesus. Right dead center. Now, the British Museum did something kind of demented. They moved the whole thing with great care. They had it all laid out in one piece at the British Museum. A few years back, in fact, just 3 years ago, they renovated the British Museum. And in moving the mosaic, well, if you ask them, they'll say it's currently under reconsideration. They broke it. Broke the whole shebang. It's busted to pieces. They saved this. This you can see. The rest of it you can't. If you go on their website and look it up, the Hidden St. Mary mosaic, page not found. But this is there. They still have it. And that's pretty spectacular too. And you can see pretty good photographs of it as well. Oh, I love this.
Hooty pulling the Minotaur's tail.
Yeah. See, again, the combination, I mean, in these Roman things, you'll find scenes from the Aeneid, for example, and scenes from Roman mythology, and scenes from Christology. You know, all of this combined into one cultural presentation, which is why Christianity has always been in the context of its culture. We can't separate it from art. We can't separate it from music. We can't separate it from literature. We can't separate it from any of those things, any kind of expression. We can't even... It's interesting, there's a book that just came out, A Reconsideration of the Enlightenment, and the fellow who wrote it is an evangelical atheist, which means he totally misses the point of the Enlightenment was born in the context of Christianity. If you divorce Christianity from the Enlightenment, it's very nice, but it doesn't make any sense. All of this comes together in one great presentation. And if you want to see what happens when you rip Christian themes out of art, go see A Wrinkle in Time. It comes out tomorrow. Did you ever read that?
Yeah.
Oh, God. Talk to Julia. She used to house sit for the author. A Wrinkle in Time. And one was it Newbery Prize. It's a great, great kid story. I read it in 6th grade. I loved it. It's the first book I really, really enjoyed. And then many decades later, I would find myself in our rectory in Litchfield, sitting at our dining room table, next to the author. And I was very happy to say to her, you know, Madeline, in 6th grade, I was scolded by my teacher for saying, A Wrinkle in Time has a lot of Christian themes in it. And because my 6th grade teacher wanted to be the principal, she, no. I said, Madeline? And Madeline said, one of the most wonderful things an author can say. Well, clearly your teacher was an idiot. It's like that scene in Annie Hall where Woody Allen's arguing about Marshall McLuhan and actually pulls Marshall McLuhan from off. Yeah, well, ask him. Well, his family, I felt great. I wanted to call Mrs. Suschewski on the phone and tell her, you were wrong.
You're an idiot.
Here's another site. This is known as the Water Newton Hoard. Water Newton is the name of the place. A farmer was, plowing in his field, and he found this. And this dates, again, to the, I'm pretty sure, 4th century AD. Again, stuff that was hidden. What's different about this stuff, though, I want you to take a look at it, especially those of you who are on altar. What is this stuff? What do you see?
The vessels.
Yes. Yes. This is a liturgical, this is a ciborium. This is a liturgical bread, a paten. That's where you put the liturgical bread, because obviously they baked it in big loaves back then. This may not look like it. Those are chalices. Those are 4th century chalices. This, there's been some argument about.
That's for children?
It looks like it because it looks like it's an orb, but it's not. It's a big old spoon. So it's either for baptisms or, for
Like the Greeks? Have little spoons for the babies?
No, for the water.
Not for the water.
Okay.
In the 4th century, they were doing the kind of, because the belief was it had to be as close as possible. Each unit of water to represent the Trinity had to be, identical,
Right.
or as close to it. Unlike the way we do it now, which is no,
Don't complain.
as Pam knows, because she watched carefully. The British Museum says this is a lamp. It's an interesting lamp because it has a lot of frankincense resin on the inside.
So
It's a censer. Well, it wasn't a thermal, it was situated.
Okay, so burn underneath it.
Right. And we've got, vessel for wine, or perhaps water, or baptism, which, whatever. There's a chunk, this is actually what was hit by the plow. Okay. Now, what are these little pieces here? Look at these.
Petrified host.
Oh, actually,
Yeah.
Give it to Margaret.
these were markers for votive stations on a wall. The wall's long gone, but maybe I've got a better shot of them. Oh, look at that. Isn't that beautiful?
That's for Easter.
Okay, that's for one of the votives. You can see the center hole.
Yeah.
Yeah, some sort of crude nail was banged through it. Same with this. You can see where it was banged in. Votive stations, of course, they call it a cup. It's not a cup.
And the right looks like a pig.
Yeah, it does, doesn't
Yeah.
it? Maybe where the idea came from. Oh, and finally,
Ooh,
what we were talking about earlier, the
there you go.
chalice of Antioch, which was not found in England. It was found in Antioch. The only reason I bring it up is of all these things I've shown you, this is the one you can go see in about 90 minutes. And it's in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And really, if you go down that center corridor, it's the first thing you see. It's in the wall on the right. This kind of brings up, some of this, one of the reasons why they're very careful with always studying these things that are pulled out of the ground about every 5 years or so, because the technology increases, the knowledge of what, some of the more obtuse symbols or shapes are about. I mean, it took a long time for them to figure out what those sort of pie-shaped wedges were. And that again took some technological analysis. Well, this was originally thought to be the Holy Grail.
No.
Well, right, no, because the Holy Grail would not be, as Tom and I were talking about, Spielberg actually got one thing right. Yeah. It would be a ceramic cup. It would probably look like it was well used. And so time went by and I thought, no, that's not possible. Well, recently they've been able to fire a sensor into it. What's in the middle of all that ornate silverware? A ceramic cup. I just bring that up because it's kind of interesting. I'm not saying it's the Holy Grail, but
They had ceramics back then?
an alabaster, a crude form of alabaster. And the other interesting thing about it is too, you can tell this more when you actually see it. Does it seem large to you?
It seems top-heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually needs to be held with two hands. You would hand it to the person receiving the wine, and unlike the 21st and 20th century practices, the people didn't just go, they took a mouthful of wine. I mean, they took that bread and they ate it, because that's the body and the blood and wine. Cheat yourself. Take it in, eat it, chew it, swallow it. It's in you. All right.
You are what you eat.
Yeah. And beyond.
There you go. Amen.
Folks, there we go. From the 1st to the 4th centuries, even things that inform Scripture, because again, we're talking about the period of the Acts of the Apostles, right, and the letters of Paul and some of the other things too. Very good. All right. You're welcome, everyone. Now, for those of you at home, you don't get cake.
We get cake.
The home edition.
Yes. We're getting cake here, and you have to watch the Kardashians.
It's a birthday card I looked over.